Oh hey, I'm glad you're here. This episode was recorded for next season, but I enjoyed it so much I just had to put it out now. My guest for this episode has been a published writer since he was 19. In this conversation we discuss one of his books and two that are upcoming, but he has a lot of work out there. Despite my love for indie and cult films from Japan, I hadn't come across his work until recently. And to be honest, reading about films for me has only begun in like the last 5 years or so. I discovered his writings because he was featured on a Blu-ray supplement, which is something I just watched because I had to see all the films from a specific director. And as I say in this episode, I wish I'd come across him sooner. I mention this because how and why we see things, especially these days, is strange. What with algorithms and pay for visibility, which, like, the best example for that is old radio, where record labels would pay radio stations to play a band in hopes that it would gain traction in the popular eye. I mean, even look at movies now on iTunes or Amazon. Any genre has some movies, but there are so many that aren't even visible. And that's not even on like one platform, given there's so many platforms. And that's just published or major releases. Anyway, let's just talk movies, okay? Alright, let's get right to it. Our guest is Patrick Macias. The movies are kind of a concept we came up with for this episode, and I sure hope you enjoyed. And this is VHS. Hello, and welcome to VHS, the podcast where each episode is about a film and the guest has the profession or experience portrayed in the film, except for when we do something completely different. I'm your host, Dirk Marshall, and I want to hear from you. Few things make me happier than when listeners share their experiences with the movies and topics we discuss. So you can find us on social medias, on the Instagrams and Twitters, VHUS_podcast. You can email me through the sauce website, Marshall's Hot Sauce. I just love the feedback. Without sounding creepy, I want to know your thoughts. My guest for this special episode is acclaimed author Patrick Macias. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Dirk. Glad to be here.
For people looking for your work, Tokyoscope is the book. It's out of print, but you can still track down copies. That's what I did. I came across you on the Mondo Macabro Blu-ray for Haunted Turkish Bathhouse. I was completely unaware of your work, and I was like, I like this person. Instantly a fan. I found the book, read it cover to cover, twice now. I think it's really, really great, and I'm excited for more of your work because rumor has it you have 2 upcoming books.
Yeah, I have 2 books coming out at the end of this year. One is Essential Anime, co-written by Samuel Satin, and then A Kid's Guide to Anime and Manga, which is also co-written by Sam. And then early next year, I've got Mondo Tokyo, which is kind of a collection of some of my earlier writing on Japanese subculture from like the last 15 years. So that's coming out, I guess, around January 2024. So for people who like Tokyoscope, that's sort of taking that sort of, aesthetic out into the real world and seeing what kind of wacky things are happening in the streets of Tokyo.
I love that. One of the things I really appreciate about Tokyoscope, the book, is that the people that you're talking to are the people that, like, those are the filmmakers that really resonated with me. Growing up in a video store, I didn't have a lot of access to, say, Japanese films, except for a few that we'll talk about. But when I would meet people that did know films from Japan, it was always like Kurosawa. It was always something very quote-unquote prestigious in a way, and I love those things too, but the stuff that I always get excited about and want to talk about are some of the more directors that we'll be talking about today, I feel like. And so when I was reading this, I was just like, this is the time and effort that I like to see given to these voices in films. So yeah, again, I really recommend this book for people. First of all, also let me say, I'm gonna mispronounce things.
Oh, it's okay.
My first episode, I learned from Leila Del Duca, who is a comic book artist, that it's pronounced manga. I've been saying manga the whole time.
Manga.
Like
that's fine.
White guy
it's
in Oregon, I guess, but it's...
Yeah, my whole life I've been saying anime, and then you move to Japan and everyone says anime, because that's the Japanese pronunciation. So then when I pronounce it, anime, back to people, overseas, they go, man, what's wrong with you? Why don't you pronounce it anime? They come down and I'm like, well, I'm kind of speaking Japanese to most people because I live in Tokyo now. So it's really difficult for me to flip the language switch. Like, can't win for losing, I guess.
Yeah.
So I don't worry about pronunciation too much.
Okay, great. It also sounds weird when somebody in Oregon saying, anime? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, anime is the correct pronunciation here in Japan because of the way they sound the vowels.
Yeah,
So,
it's like
but my whole life I've been saying anime,
yeah,
and
me
so did
too.
most people. That's just kind of the way it is. But if I take that back to America, people go, "What do you mean? You mean anime, right?
Right. Yeah.
Why are you pronouncing it anime? Why are you pronouncing it anime? Are you pretentious or something?"
Yeah, it's a, I guess you just can't
It's
win.
a wacky world. It's a
Can't.
small world after all, as
Yeah,
they say.
but that book that you have coming out, I'm super excited about because my daughter is 9. This last couple years, anime and manga have become like a huge thing for her. It actually was what got her kind of over the hump into reading, was actually those books and the visual element of them and the storytelling. So, of course, the big ones like Studio Ghibli stuff, but then we've delved into very weird corners with the help of bookstore employees to keep me out of tentacle porn and things. But yeah, I'm excited to have some help with that book. So,
Yeah, I'm so struck by how mainstream anime and manga is now
hmm
and, overseas because I mean, back in the day it was just something for us nerd. I mean, it was a real nerdy, real nichey kind of thing, but as one of my friends like to describe it, like now it's a big niche. Now it's like super mainstream. Like all my relatives and friends in America have kids who are into anime and manga, and it's just really unthinkable that they're watching the same stuff that like my daughter who's 10 years old in Japan is watching,
right.
like
Yeah.
half the world away.
Yeah, it's wild. I go to the mall and there's more stores selling anime, manga, and K-pop things. Just like it's Sanrio, all that stuff too. Like I used to have to special order this stuff when she was little. I mean, littler, and now it's just like you just go to the mall and there it is, all of it. It's just, it's a wild time. You are also a podcaster with Pure Tokyoscope, so I wanted to mention that. Would you mind telling people a little bit about the podcast?
Yeah, we've been podcasting for about a year. Me and my buddy Matt Alt, who's also an author who lives here in Tokyo. He's the author of Pure Invention, which is a book kind of about how Japanese inventions sort of changed the world. Like the invention of Pac-Man, video games, anime is in there, Gundam, and karaoke, the Walkman, stuff like that. And so Matt and I have been friends for like a long time. We bum around the city and look for used toys and figures and stuff like that, and we just started podcasting on a whim and been doing it for about a year now. We have some episodes like that I could recommend, like the one where we talked to filmmaker Ryuhei Kitamura
Oh yeah.
about the Tsuyama shotgun massacre, kind of a classic true crime event in Japanese history. We have an episode about the 40th anniversary of The Last Unicorn. But a lot of times it's just me and Matt just kind of hanging out, spitballing on recent Japanese pop culture headlines and whatever's kind of rambling around in our brains, usually Shakey's Pizza and other kind of like weird American fast food chains that still endure in Japan decades after kind of closing down in other parts of the globe. Remains a fascination.
Yeah, I love it because it's like it's about pop culture stuff. It's short episodes. It's very kind of breakneck paced. There's not a wasted moment in an episode, so that's not common with podcasts. It's really fascinating. I thoroughly enjoyed the anime that made me episodes that
Yeah,
you recently.
anime, tomato, like whatever comes naturally. Yeah, that was kind of a long series we did talking about the kind of formative anime that kind of like made our personality. I guess we were kind of taking a page from the movies that made me with the Joe Dante podcast, which is
Yeah.
one that I listen to a lot and really enjoy. And then we had like a friend who was unfamiliar with anime. He was like an older guy, and he's like, "What shows do I need to see to kind of understand the evolution of this art form?"
Of course.
And so we just kind of threw down some choice titles from I guess the 60s up until today.
Yeah, and some of it's stuff that I'd heard of, and for me, another thing that I really like about reading writings like yours is that for me, it's really haphazard how I come across things, especially pre-internet. It was just so random. There wasn't like this person did this and worked with this studio, and sometimes you could find like a huge tome in a video store that you could flip through, but you had limited time, limited access with that. So putting it together and seeing like, oh, these are the directors that were working on films at the same time, or realizing like movements that happened in other countries, it's just really helps my brain kind of structure. We'll talk about a director today that I didn't even realize was the same person because they changed their name, and I was like, I love all these movies, and then I found out it's from the same dude. So I was like, oh, okay, well.
I mean, it's a weird history because a lot of these movies were, exported overseas and then they would have retitling. And there's so many multiple versions and different titles for a lot of Japanese films. So it's a handful, you
Yeah.
know.
So, today, what we're doing is something a little different with this episode. We're talking about Japanese films, but through the lens of media's evolution. So, television, film, VHS, DVD, Blu ray, streaming. And then for each of these, I've just brought one title that was the first for me when the sort of flip to a new way of ingesting film. So, that's kind of how we'll go. And then for each one of mine, I have a little hint that I'll give out before the title, just for a little game, if you will, as we progress. But I guess we'll start with TV. Are you approaching this as in things that you saw? Because when you were a child, you were not living in Japan, right?
No, I grew up in Sacramento, California, and actually wanted
Okay.
to start with movies with celluloid because, like, some of my first memories
Oh,
are,
great.
going to the movie theater and,
Sure.
seeing crazy images up on that screen. And I think the first movie I can remember seeing was in 1976, this movie called Jack and the Beanstalk. And it was terrifying and weird and surreal. And it was made in Japan by an anime director who's still around was it Gisaburo Sugi? And
Okay.
for some reason, this animated film, was dubbed in English, released in American theaters, and at least on at the theater that I saw it with, it was playing on a double feature with a Nature Gone Wild horror film called Rattlers, which was not meant for kids. But I remember I have this memory of everyone in the theater grabbing their kids and running
Oh,
while these
wow.
snakes like poured out of a shower. So to me, it's like the collision between a Japanese film and like something on a double feature. Like
Mm-hmm.
I a couple years later saw Godzilla versus the Smog Monster on a double feature with Bugsy Malone,
Whoa.
which is like now one of my favorite movies of all time, right? Or Kinji Fukasaku's Message from Space on a double bill with Luigi Kazi's Star Crash.
Oh,
This is like
what?
another, like, it's those double features that stick in my mind as having made big, big, big impressions on me. Rattlers, Jack and the Beanstalk, Bugsy Malone, and Godzilla. And that's kind of something I really miss about going to the movies is that double feature,
Yeah.
the unexpected, the B side, that
That's
kind
a
of makes the A side sweeter.
Yeah, I mean, fascinating pairings, and I'm gonna be tracking down Jack and the Beanstalk for sure. What I brought was also a double feature, and one of them is like, I mean, I felt silly even bringing it up, but it's the first thing I saw play, because in Oregon we didn't get a lot of Japanese films, and if we did, I didn't know, because I don't know if they were, no, it wouldn't even been redubbed. We just didn't get a lot of movies. So the first one, the hint I have for you, is if you asked most people for an animated feature from Japan in the 80s, what do you think people would say?
Akira,
Yep,
I'm going to
that is
guess.
100% it from
All right.
1988. I was in high school and this played, it was a double bill, but this is the one that I'm more excited to talk about because it's not a weird American movie that was thrown together at the same time. And I don't know how this happened, but it was something that I absolutely love now. So the hint is it's a novel series adapted into a movie. Do you already know what I'm going to say?
Wait, so this is a Japanese film or an
Yeah,
American film?
Japanese. And the
Okay, no.
character design is by, and I'm sorry for the mispronunciation, Moribi Murano?
I'm blanking.
Okay. He designed the novel covers as well, which is what makes it kind of fascinating. It's directed and produced by, and this is probably where you'll get it, Rintaro? It's the Dagger of Kumai?
Oh, Dagger of Kamui.
Kamui. See, that's the thing is I've needed a soundboard all these years. I've been saying it wrong.
Wow, they were showing that? They were projecting that?
Well, that's the thing is I don't know how they were doing it because I don't think now, looking back, it could have been film, right? I mean, how would that have gotten here?
It didn't receive like a large English language release. It's possible they made like a print for international
Oh,
sales.
it was subtitled.
Okay, that might have been what it is, because I know that they would produce subtitled prints and sometimes send them around to like film festivals.
Yeah,
But I
I
didn't know that got out in the wild. That's amazing. That's a long one. That's like a 2.5 hour. They go to America and they meet Mark Twain
yeah,
and he
yes.
speaks Japanese.
I loved it so much, just the design of it, and I wasn't until way later that when I could actually look it up and be like, "Oh, this is really fascinating." But then I saw it on VHS under the name Revenge of the Ninja Warrior,
Yeah, yeah.
and it was 22 minutes shorter, cutting a lot of the good stuff. But it was, I don't know, even know how to explain it because I was so ignorant on animation coming out of Japan and the design. I mean, I knew I liked stuff like Voltron and things that were being like redubbed and stuff, but I didn't know what it was. And then this movie even looked even stranger, just the artwork.
Yeah, I mean, it has like some amazing ninja magic in it, and it's like a
Yes.
big historical epic. It's the kind of thing like they could have done in live action as like a huge kind of David Lean style,
Yeah.
historical adventure. But the fact that it's anime lets them do all this crazy surrealist sort of stuff in there, and it's a big movie, and it's got an amazing soundtrack that's kind of a fusion of like traditional Japanese music and like rock. I
Yeah.
actually have the vinyl LP soundtrack right here, and that's
Oh,
something I
whoa.
yeah, and I'll send you this link to a footage of the band playing it live on TV, Japanese TV in the '80s,
Yeah.
and it's like 20 guys just like rocking out like on the koto drums and like screaming guitar solos. It's so great.
I love that. I want to see that. Thank you for sending that over.
Sure.
All right.
It's
So,
rare you meet someone who even like mentions Dagger of Kamui. So it's a bit of a forgotten film. I think that director Rintaro is one of the great, 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 great Japanese anime directors, and I wish more people were kind of reaching at his altar.
yeah,
So
that's the thing that is so interesting about this is that, I mean, I didn't think anyone other than yourself would know the movie that I'm talking about, at least as far as in the States. And then it's a double feature, which you were just talking about double features. And then I was listening to your podcast today, and then you talked about Rintaro, and I was like, yeah, I agree. I think that this is one of the
yeah,
many
it's like a
people that.
gravity well, like kind of
Mhm.
like all the energy sort of gathers around like the big planets, like, Akira Kurosawa or like Hayao Miyazaki and like all these other like things sort of just drift around in
Yeah.
space. These undiscovered planets and planetoids like Rintaro and guys like that. And it's too bad. And I hope to get their due someday, but you never know.
Yeah, it's like there has to be some kind of documentary or some kind of, I don't know what it is, but
Yeah, in Japan, you usually have to die first,
yeah.
unfortunately, before you
Okay,
get
I don't want
it.
to wish that on him, but
No, I don't either. That's the way it happens sometimes.
yeah. And I mean, this is also like how I like to see animated films that come from, Japan or anywhere, is I like them in the original voices with
Hmm.
subtitles. I don't like the dubbings, the Ghibli stuff where they're like, well, look at Ethan Hawke or whoever playing it. I'm like, I don't need
Billy
this.
Bob Thornton is in this movie. Isn't that
Yeah,
great?
Phil Hartman is the cat. I'm like, I don't need this at all. I don't know why this is here.
Stunt casting. Yeah, I
It's
mean,
yeah.
that's the thing about, we'll get into video, I'm sure, in a bit, but, a lot of these anime films were cut up,
Hmm.
re-edited,
Hmm.
retitled, and like released, for the children's section of the video store.
Yeah.
So either you just kind of like you accepted that or it made you want to dive deep. It made you want to
Yeah.
go to a video store in Japantown where no one spoke English and hunt down, like the uncut copy of the Macross movie that had the shower scene
Right.
where Lin Minmay gets naked and stuff like that. Because it was out there. You knew it was out there. Your friends had a tape or something, but that was the thrill of the hunt.
Hmm. Yeah. I that was way later for me, from when I was a kid in a video
Yeah, but there's
store.
that tension between, animation being for kids in the West and then in Japan where they were trying to push it as far as they could go. I guess with a double feature of Akira and Dagger of Kamui, that's kind of the moment where the secret got out that, we didn't need to kind of butter this stuff down anymore. Like with Akira, it was sort of like anime has sort of arrived. People know that there's this kind of new wave of animation coming out of Japan, and there's no reason to kind of disguise it or slap a just for kids sticker on it or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah. I completely agree. Do you want to go from there to television?
Yeah, TV. I mean, I was like 5 years old. I was like a crazy dinosaur kid. And one day, my dad, who was also a movie buff, said, "Hey, I saw something in the TV guide. You should check this out." And I said, "What is it?" And he's like, "It's called Godzilla King of the Monsters,
Yes.
starring Raymond Burr, 1956." And so I got out like my Radio Shack cassette recorder and like stuck it up against the TV speaker and recorded the soundtrack. And I was blown away. I had never seen a Godzilla movie before. And I went in with the first one. And that's, yeah, I mean, as much as I love the Japanese Gojira, the original version that doesn't have Raymond Burr,
Yeah.
looking at awkward stunt doubles from the back of their heads and being inserted into scenes where he doesn't really belong.
Yeah.
I love the American version of Godzilla so much. And then I became obsessed, of course, like you would expect with Godzilla. And then I began looking at the TV guide every week and marking things off like, okay, Godzilla, where's Godzilla? Is there any Godzilla in here? And eventually there was, but I mean, back in the day on UHF TV in the 80s, these movies would either play Saturday afternoon or in the middle of the night,
Oh,
like,
okay.
after midnight, after hours, as they say. And that was when I discovered like there was nothing else to do. You couldn't,
Yeah.
you would be waiting for the movie to start. You'd be waiting for the 2 a.m. screening of Godzilla versus the Sea Monster. And that was when I began discovering like all these other films like that I was never intended to see, that I never would have seen unless I was waiting for Godzilla. Like La Dolce Vita, I must have seen when I was like 8 or 9 years old, dubbed into English, and that blew my mind.
Sure.
I remember Midnight Cowboy
Oh,
is
yeah.
another movie that I saw, like very age inappropriate, when I was like waiting for, Destroy All Monsters. So those were films that really kind of shaped like who I am today and my taste in film and stuff like that. So I really have to thank Godzilla and his buddies. And then eventually when like video came around, you could set your timer,
Right.
and then
We did that a
wake up
lot.
the next morning and have like 6 hours of Tom Labree's Night Comfort Theater and stuff like that. Just the weird UHF aesthetic with the local commercials, the
Yeah.
local advertisers, the beat up prints, the movies that didn't really belong together. I mean, I'm getting very nostalgic, but there's no other way
Oh,
to.
when I come across a YouTube, when I'm looking for a movie and it pops up on YouTube and I'm like, and it says like original commercials,
Original
I
commercial.
could not be more excited. I'm like watching it right now. It doesn't matter how mushy and muddy that image is. Like I love it. I have so many VHS tapes that I recorded of like MTV's 120 Minutes and all this other stuff, and they'll have like movie trailers, and I mean,
Oh yeah, that's the good stuff. It's the ephemera that
yeah,
makes the main dish so sweet.
yes, yes,
Yeah, and in
well said.
Sacramento, we had this guy, Tom Labrie, Night Comfort Theater. He was a local waterbed salesman, and he would sponsor the all-night movies. And he would sit on his waterbed. He was like a really groovy guy. He might have like been the dude who like lived next door to the Bradys, and it was like we're well into the '80s,
Yeah,
but he's still kind of dressed like like Dirk Diggler
perfect.
on his waterbed, with his 8-track stereo, and his commercials are on YouTube as well. And that just sends me back
Okay,
to the
yeah.
days. Like, hey guys and gals, check out the waterbed specials and watch the movie. And, all you single ladies out there, it's ladies' night at an all-night movie theater. So
Perfect. Suggestion for your next book, Waiting for Godzilla, I think is
that's an idea. Yeah, yeah, but I think people get mad if there's not enough Godzilla. They're
Oh,
like,
that's true.
it's called blah 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 blah
I
Godzilla.
hate Waiting for Godzilla. My film,
Pay the licensing fee now if you want
right.
Godzilla. And it's not like you can just name your product Bagzilla or anything like that, or
If
Bridezilla. I think everyone gets in trouble if they
oh, the Zilla
get the
part.
word Zilla out of court.
All right. Wow. My film's from 1964. It is also a Godzilla movie, and
Okay, that limits it down to 2.
and here's the hint that'll give it away for
Okay.
you. 2 words. Victory Dance?
Oh, Victory Dance. So that's Godzilla versus Monster Zero,
Oh,
right?
I had Invasion of Astro Monster. Is that a different
Okay,
title?
Invasion of Astro Monster is an alternate title
Okay,
for Monster
perfect.
Zero,
I see. I
Godzilla
knew
versus
it when I
Monster
was like, I don't know how to talk around this one because you're just gonna know it. But that
Oh
was
no. I don't want to be that guy, but that's a 1965
oh,
film.
65. Thank you.
No, I don't, yeah.
No, please be that guy. I love it. When I saw, because I was watching this movie and it was big monsters, and I was like, okay. And I'd heard someone talk about Godzilla, and I didn't even know how to pronounce the other creature.
Oh, King Ghidorah and
Ghidorah,
Rodan.
thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I knew Rodan, and so I'm watching it. I'm like, okay, but it was the dance part that like really captivated.
Oh yeah.
Just the
Oh
little
yeah.
hop, and I was just like, this is what I'm here for, and that says a lot about me.
So you saw that on TV on UHF back
Yeah.
in the day?
Back in the
Okay.
day, that was the one. We didn't have a lot of Godzilla movies in my dad's video store. That's what I saw, and
Oh,
then
that was in the store. Okay, so that was probably like the Paramount home video release. I can kind of see the box in my head. Oh, it was
probably.
called Invasion of Astro Monster. Was that
I
how
mean,
it was?
I remember the image, so I just typed in Victory Dance to know which one it was,
Uh,
and Invasion of Astro Monster is what popped up. But so that's what I wrote down. But,
yeah. That's probably. I mean, I love the original Godzilla. I love all Godzilla movies,
Mhm.
but if I really had to choose one to take with me to Planet X, it would be Godzilla versus Monster. That movie has everything. That's got Godzilla in outer space.
Yeah,
Got an incredible performance by Nick Adams. He thinks he's in Casablanca for some reason. Like he's just really going for it. And It's such a great. I want to watch it right now. Yeah, it's my favorite.
Yeah, I immediately went to YouTube and was like, I just need to see it one more time. And like, yeah, I actually, this year, I'm going to rewatch as many of the Godzilla movies as I can because I have a lot of vacancies in there, the things that I just I missed somehow over the years. So I'm
Yeah,
excited
that's
for
a
that
hot
one.
one. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's as good as it gets in my mind.
which brings us to VHS.
Yeah, I can't think of a single VHS that really. There were so many. I mean, I was such a video store kid. You know,
Were
I
you
would.
actively seeking out like movies from Japan or
I mean, I was just a movie junkie at this point.
okay?
So, like, from having my brain, blown off by like Bugsy Malone and Godzilla versus the Smog
Yes.
Monster and Rattlers and Jack and the Beanstalk, like anything that was like horror, sci-fi, cult. I was already
Hmm.
like reading whatever was left of Famous Monsters of Filmland. It was still being published, and then
Yeah.
Starlog, of course. So anything genre and anything Japanese. So we had a lot of video stores in kind of in the hood, and so my dad was kind of a movie buff, so we were renting stuff like Maniacs once we had a VCR,
Hmm.
and eventually when those kind of tapped out, I was really, really anxious to get into the Japanese video stores because we had a few in San Francisco, which was like 2 hours away. And it was just, all the anime, all the live action films, like, crazy Japanese superhero shows that I'd never seen. And it was just, I had to get in there. That was just like, Mission Impossible style. I had to like, go down on a wire and somehow like get a rental card. And I mean, eventually you would kind of meet other people, like really early anime fans or like, Godzilla crazy people, and you would tape trade, or
Yes.
someone
Yeah.
would drive to the video store who had a card or like knew a guy. And like, it was like buying drugs. It was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
running the explosive liquid water lab in Livewire. There's a
Hmm.
place where people are chaining together VCRs. Like that VCR culture ran real deep.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I was in a place one time where the closet was just VCRs and then they were just tapes, just going. You're just like, okay, this is illegal, which we knew because we were already paying $20 for movies that didn't have covers and things. But yeah, same. I had to find them. But from growing up in the video store, so there was one movie I was completely obsessed with from a very young age, and that was not the movie I'm picking, but Shogun Assassin. And I did,
When
yeah, I didn't know what it was. I just was obsessed with the soundtrack and, of course, the images I was seeing. I didn't know until I was at a comic book shop that there was something called Lone Wolf and Cub. And then I had to find those movies, which we didn't, of course, have. And so, yeah, I love it. I know some people are like against it, but I just,
Oh yeah, I mean it's one of those films like I probably in my heart of hearts prefer to the original
yeah,
Japanese version just because it's so rich with kind of the music
yeah,
and the performances by like Sandra Bernhard as like the female ninja.
so
Like
wild.
all those lines were just like burned into my brain, and
Yeah.
that's one of those things I discovered on VHS at the local video store. And you're just like Shogun Assassin. I'm still kind of catching up on my Japanese Jidaigeki, the sword period films.
Mm.
But I mean, that one is so good that just hits the pleasure centers of my brain. That's sort of like it's, Dawn of the Dead with samurai swords or something like that.
I mean, when the lady ninja leaps out of her outfit and runs backwards for 3 miles, or I'm guessing, it's like, I mean, just the imagery alone is, I love it so much.
So when I moved to San Francisco, I partially moved there just to have access to the Japanese video stores at Japantown. And around that time, I was like reading zines, right? Movie zines.
Oh
You're trying
yeah.
to discover the most, the hardest to hard to find. Like you were trying to discover the most marginal, forgotten cult films you possibly could, and then hunt them down. And so there was Asian Cult Cinema magazine that was published out of Florida, and Chris
Whoa.
D was a musician and writer living in Los Angeles, really famous in the punk rock scene over there. And he was writing a column for Asian Cult Cinema about Yakuza movies because they had like Little Tokyo in LA, and they did their own video stores. And he was just blind renting everything that had a guy with a lot of tattoos and the
Sure.
Dosu sword. And he was writing little capsule reviews. And I was like, man, I got to see these movies, but there's no way I can see them. The video stores here in Japantown just don't have them. And then one day, a new video store opened up in Japantown, and they had a Yakuza section. And they had a
Oh,
bunch of the same films that Christie had written about. And the one was it the first one I rented? Is one of the first was Kinji Fukasaku's Street Mobster.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a lean, mean kind of almost like a Scorsese styled
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yakuza movie about like a loser who keeps on losing, and it's just great. If it's the one Yakuza movie I get to take with me to Planet X, Street Mobster is the one.
Yeah, I once I knew what a Yakuza was, I had to see everything that I could, so I totally get that. There's a lot, I mean, so much that I haven't seen and it's still on the to watch list, but everything up until like, I mean, Mike's Full Metal Yakuza, anything that new comes out, I'm like, I gotta see that. I mean, nowadays it's so weird because you can just Google Yakuza movies. I don't know, the searching for things is so simple now that's like, but you'll also get top 20, all the same top 20 lists. You have to dig deeper to find like stuff. But yeah, no, that's a great point.
Yeah, no, I was obsessed with Kinji Fukasaku because he directed Message from Space,
Hmm.
which was a movie I saw in a double feature when I was a little kid, which was, kind of they call it a Star Wars ripoff. I
Yeah,
mean, I think it's
I
one of my
love
favorites.
it.
I love it. I think all good-hearted people probably love it, but it was a film I was obsessed with because for a long time there was no home video of
Mm.
that, and it didn't really play on TV. I saw it in theaters twice when I was a kid when it
Oh.
came out, and then I didn't see it again for like another 10 years. So it loomed very large in my mind,
Hmm.
as did Kinji Fukasaku, because he also directed The Green Slime, one of the greatest
Yeah.
Japanese monster movies of all time. And then his career gets increasingly crazy. Then he becomes like the Yakuza movie director who sort of changes the genre with the Battles Without Honor and Humanity series.
Mm.
And then he does like big fantasy films like Virus, Satomi Hakenden. And then he does like Battle Royale.
Right. Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, that's another one that like in the DVD era just blew my mind. And I had to get the second one. When the second one came out, I was just like, yeah, I
yeah, Battle Royale really changed the game for a
mm.
lot of people. And I think, it was like a lightning rod for like a new generation of Japanese movie freaks to, get excited about. I mean, it had all the timing. It was kind of happened around like Columbine,
Yeah.
school shootings, a few years later, maybe like 1 or 2 years later, like 9/11 happened. Like it was just, on the tipping point of where a lot of things were going to go, sadly. But yeah, Kinji Fukasaku is my favorite Japanese director, bar none. So I really owe it all to Street Mobster for kind of loved him as a kid, but then as an adult became like an obsessive follower and was so happy to see, him kind of explode with Battle Royale.
Yeah, I love looking at like a director's oeuvre, I guess we'll use, because it's just like when you're looking at those beginning successes or, the work with in science fiction, and then you have the Yakuza chapter, and then you have, like you said, from like Virus to Battle Royale, and it's wild. And I think another thing that kind of helped this like Mike and the Battle Royale era type stuff is that huge wave of like extreme films was happening, and so people were looking for like an extreme movie from Japan, from France, from Germany, and America was trying to do all these like torture porn movies and things. People were trying to push gore and horror into different quadrants and things, and so I know that definitely put more eyes on like Ichi the Killer and an Audition for sure. Um,
Sure. Yeah, and it was interesting that kind of like, Fukasaku was like this older generation of guys who had sort of pushed the envelope back in the day, kind of like, and then you had Mike, you had sort of like two generations of Japanese dudes
oh
sort of,
yeah.
different points on the timeline.
Yeah, that's a great point. I never thought about that, the age difference there.
Yeah, and that was the thing at this Rotterdam Film Festival that they were both there. They were both in attendance. That's where I met both of them. They had a Fukasaku retrospective, and then they had this new Japanese filmmaker, Takashi Miike. So in my mind, they're kind of linked as a result.
Oh yeah, I said earlier your foreword was by Miike, but the afterwards by Miike. The foreword's by Fukasaku, which, since you're mentioning, had to have been amazing. That you have this. I mean, you've been writing, but like to have this book come out and to get the foreword by your favorite director.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was really amazed that that happened.
That's
And
so
I guess
cool.
he passed away a few years later after that. So I felt really,
Wow.
really lucky to make that connection with him through the
Yeah.
help of his translator, facilitated that. So I think I met him once in person there in Rotterdam, and then we did a telephone call, and then yeah, there were a lot of faxes back and
Mm-hmm.
forth to get his forward.
Yeah, but it's a really sweet foreword, I think. if I'm remembering it correctly.
Yeah, no, he was I don't suppose he's a complicated man, but he had a really complicated feelings about Americans as a result of World War II.
Hmm.
And if you meet Japanese guys of a certain generation, under what circumstances you're supposed to meet them under, you'll eventually end up talking about the war
Oh,
and how they feel about it, how you feel about it. And you feel like the weight of history is upon you to represent a lot of America
right.
in those moments. And I'm not really sure how I feel about that, but it meant a lot to
Mm,
him to have those discussions, especially working with like foreign actors, because several of his big movies were international co-productions. So
hmm.
that meant a lot to him to work with guys like Vic Morrow and Glenn Ford and people like that.
Yeah, I don't know. And now I'm just blown away by I know the director, but it's just anytime that opportunity happens and works out that you get the forward by like your favorite director, it's like, you win. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'll treasure it always. Yeah.
The movie I wanted to talk about is the one that really like I was not prepared for this because Shogun Assassin is obviously recut, redubbed, but as far as Japanese speaking film made by a very singular thing and something that like changed my DNA at a molecular level, he's become one of my favorite directors. The hint I have for you is he stars in a lot of his own movies. He's also in Ichi the Killer, and I think that's all I wrote down.
Beat Takeshi?
I mean, there's kind of a lot. They're not very good hints, and I'm not the best hint writer. But I'm referring to Tetsuo the Iron Man.
Oh, Tetsuo the Iron Man, Shinya Tsukamoto.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
I
that is
love
a movie, that's for sure.
I love Tsukamoto. I wasn't prepared for this, and it became one of the movies that like I took to everywhere. Like if I was going to somebody's sleepover party or we were just gonna hang out and like drink someone's older brother's alcohol or something, I was like putting that in, which is weird. But I was just like, you've never seen this, and nobody ever had. They
Yeah,
were
it's
always
certainly
like,
provocative. It gets a reaction, that's for sure.
yeah. And then I saw his other films, and I was like, I just think this director's amazing.
Yeah, I haven't kept up. There's a bunch of new recent Tsukamoto movies I've not seen. Tsukamoto, yeah. So if you can recommend any after, like, was it
Oh,
Boxer? I think with
yeah.
Tokyo Fist is
To-
the one I'm.
Tokyo Fist is great. Vital, I really like a lot. But
Okay.
Asano was like my dude. We're about to get to when that happened because that's the DVD time. Um,
Hmm.
but um, but yeah, I just anytime I have an opportunity to shout out because it's like when in the States people talk about David Lynch in a way that they go, I didn't know that that was possible with movies. I was the same way. But seeing this, I was just like, what is this? How is this a thing? It's black and white. It's like super crazy. The soundtrack was amazing. It just seemed to push boundaries in a way that a teenager likes punk music and industrial and metal or whatever. It's like this was a movie that kind of did that. It just felt rebellious and
Yeah, it's all
um,
there. I mean, that kind of crazy spirit of the kind of Japanese underground scene of the 90s, where
yeah.
it's kind of similar to what was going on in other parts of the world where people were transgressive. They were looking to go to extremes, but the Japanese have their own kind of unique take on it with like that kind of, but it's contrasted against kind of like salaryman culture,
Yes, yeah.
how the repression of the individual can just kind of explode here in a way
Hmm.
that Tetsuo the Iron Man's kind of a great example of that.
Yeah, people like this director or like the forward for your book by Mike. Have you met these directors or were like interviews and things all done separately? Because he writes a beautiful forward for the book.
Well, yeah, I met Mike at the Rotterdam International Film Festival. Was
Okay.
that like 1990? Well, maybe that was like 97 or 99 or something like that. And I didn't know who he was. And,
Yeah, I wouldn't have
you
known then.
know, I had just seen Dead or Alive the day before, and we didn't know who he was. He's like new Japanese filmmaker. And we're like, whoa.
Yeah.
So then I interviewed Mike. I said, your movie's great. You're great. I think you're great. So we stayed in touch. And then like the next day was one of the first international screenings of Audition, Mike's Audition. And
What?
that's one of the most memorable movie screenings I've ever attended, because I remember 80% of the audience, at this prestigious film festival, jumping up and running for the exit. Kind of like me as a little kid watching the snakes coming out of the shower and rattlers.
Mm, yeah,
um,
I can only imagine. I mean, Dead or Alive, the first one is the one with the ramen, right? Where the guy's eating the ramen and then he gets shot with a shotgun and the
Yeah,
noodles fly out
yeah.
of
It
his
just has
stomach.
like this kind of psychedelic, kind of
It's
tilt-a-whirl,
wild.
impressionistic opening of like nightlife in
Yes.
Shinjuku Kabukicho.
Oh, that's great. And then audition. I mean, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we can just move to DVD, I guess. We'll move on to DVD because that's where this is all headed.
DVD was a tough era for if you were like a hardcore Japanese film fan because DVDs were real expensive in Japan.
I bet.
Like we're talking like US $100 or so. Like,
Whew.
they were probably equivalent to that back then. So to have one meant a lot. That was a big investment. But the great thing about DVDs was that sooner or later you could copy them. I mean, sooner or later you could burn them,
Yeah.
right? And I think with VHS, of course, you could copy them, but you had that kind of degeneration
Yes.
going. You would lose quality and sound and picture the further down the daisy chain of linked
Mhm.
together VCRs you went. But DVD, digitally, you could get a perfect copy. So I can't think of. I mean, I bought some of those first Toho DVDs of the Godzilla films, and I think The Terror of Mecha Godzilla from 1975. That's one of my favorite Godzilla films, and that's one I shelled out for. I put my money
Wow, I haven't
where my
seen
mouth
that.
is, and played the heck out of that one.
Okay, that's going to the top of the list for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's the last one directed by Ishiro Honda, the original Godzilla director. So
Okay.
it's kind of got that kiddie movie monster flavor of the Godzilla films from the 70s, where it's kind of like a wrestling match, but it also has some of the kind of like somber, kind of like I mean, I don't want to call it. It's got some of the ennui of the
Okay,
earlier
nice.
Godzilla films as
Godzilla
well.
on Wii.
It's
Uh,
pretty sweet. I mean, it's bittersweet, I guess you could call it.
okay.
But the thing about DVD was like at that point, I started going back and forth between the US and Japan like a lot. And so I had graduated from like Japanese video stores in the US to Japanese video stores in Japan. And I was like, I need a rental card. I would just go
Yeah.
to the video stores like a hungry dog looking, in the butcher's window,
Hmm.
going like, look at all these movies, look at all the everything's here, like in all the TV shows, everything. So you would have to find a Japanese person and shake them down for their rental card, and then leave with a stack. You'd have your burner on your laptop, and you would just crank out as much as you could on the limited time you had before you had to take your flight back home.
Wow.
So I still to this day have kind of like office, boxes, file boxes like filled with DVD-Rs of I don't even know what. I probably didn't even watch half of them. That's the sad thing. You think, oh, when I get home, I'll watch all 26 episodes of,
Right.
Monster Prince Kaiju OG, and it just doesn't happen. You watch the first volume or something like that.
Wow. I wouldn't even know what to do because, like you were saying, that San Francisco, 2 hours away, had Japanese video stores. Like Oregon, we didn't have that. Even in our bigger city, Portland, there wasn't until early 2000. There was a store called the Compound, and it was really like they had some collectible toys. They had one section that was like shoes and some clothing, and then upstairs it was like an art gallery, which was cool. But then they had one little corner where there was this tiny, tiny little shelf, and they had DVDs on there, and it was movies from Korea or Japan, but it was like the case is still it's not in English, and they would put a little sticker at the bottom that would say like what the name of it was, and I was transfixed because I had never been in an environment like that ever, and I was like I have to have all of this, and so you could rent them at first, and then they just cut that and they were just selling the DVDs, and so I was blind buying all these things. So the uh, the director I want to talk about, we've already mentioned. He played a small role in an American movie directed by Eli Roth, and he made a western which featured American director Quentin Tarantino. It's
Takashi
there he
Miike.
is. I mean, Ichi the Killer was the first one I saw. Followed the same week with Audition, Visitor Q, Gozu. Soon after that, I just was like, I couldn't get enough. I was like, what is this? This is so crazy. So I just didn't know what was happening. I recognized Asano being in movies, so Party 7, Survive Style 5. I was just like, I just was steeping myself within these films, like, and some from Korea, like Unlucky Monkey and things, but like, it was really these directors and actors that like I couldn't get enough of. I'd go, look on the internet and be like, what am I missing? Is there things that like I haven't found yet? Funky Forest and things later on that I would track down.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a strong period for
Holy
Japanese cinema,
smokes.
the late 90s, early 2000s. Because, I mean, it was riding on the back of J-horror to a certain extent, but
Mm.
also there was like the home video boom in Japan, V cinema. So there were all those straight-to-video movies. Like, that's kind of where Miike cut his teeth. And there was like, just an independent kind of film movement that was still pretty strong back then. So yeah, that was a great time. There's a lot of stuff to discover back then.
There was so much, and then like because I was buying it, I just always had it, and so for me it like made it very normal. And so when I would tell people like Captain Banana and Party 7, and people would be like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's right. You don't have that. I guess that is a frame of reference." Or Peach Skin Man and Shark Hip
Oh,
Girl.
yeah.
These are things that like I love these. Like Asana was like my Johnny Depp character or whatever. Like as actor. I mean, and so yeah, I just
Yeah, I always trip out when he shows up like in Thor or like those Marvel
yeah,
movies. I'm like, dude, what are you doing here?
it's
Like,
real
shouldn't you be
bizarre.
in a BK movie or something like that?
Yeah, he was like in the new Mortal Kombat movie, but like as like the older guy. I don't know. It was just I was just watching it going, oh, there he is, because in my mind he's still stuck in like 2002, 2003. But
Yeah, yeah, so am I.
yeah,
That's how I feel most of the time
same,
as well.
same as I'm surrounded by all of these films. Which brings us to Blu-ray.
I'm gonna choose the Blu-ray Shout Factory Blu-ray of Message from Space by Kenji
Yes,
Fukusaku
excellent.
because
I have it
that's a
right over
film that I
here.
loved since I was a little kid, and here I was helping to produce extra features for the Blu-ray of the film. And I gathered together all my Message from Space memorabilia from all my books, and like I was like a rabid Message from Space collector. I still am to this day. If I see anything out in the wild related to the film, I have to
Uh,
buy it. I search auction sites in Japan here with my keywords, and so I scanned a bunch of stuff. I helped assembled the video essay. That meant a lot. That's kind of like going full circle with that film. But Blu-ray, was a chance for people to jack the prices even more in Japan. I mean, as expensive as DVDs were, Blu-rays, and now what we have like 4K
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's crazy.
UHD. I mean, anything they can do Japanese pricing is like they'll try to get you to pay as much as they can for their products if it's like home video, which is really painful. And piracy with Blu-ray was a lot more challenging than it was with DVD
Yeah,
because the file sizes were so big, right? So you'd have to have like 25 to 50 gigs of hard drive space. And, I'm not that organized. So, I mean, I have a fair amount of Japanese Blu-rays, but those were investments. That was like,
yeah.
treat yourself,
Hmm.
once or twice a year to a Japanese Blu-ray. But Message from Space meant a lot because I worked on it and I got a comp copy.
Yeah, that's great. For me, it's a lot of times it's an upgrade on something, or it was a DVD I got that's a bootleg, or something that they put out something new and I want the special features like you've been on. So I chose a director who's often cited as an early contributor to Japanese cyberpunk cinema. That could be so many people. So I won't even consider that a hint. I'll just tell you that it's the director who did Burst City, Crazy Thunder Road, Electric
Oh,
Dragon
wow.
8000 Volts, Sogo Ishii.
Sogo Ishii. Yeah, love that guy.
So, have you met him?
I did, yeah.
Ah,
He had a retrospective at the Pacific Film Archive in Berkeley, and we hung out.
that's so
Because the thing
cool.
is, like, I was working at Viz Media back then, and they had a company within the company that was releasing live action films. They released Dead or Alive for the
Mhm.
US home video market. They were doing film distribution. They did Taste of Tea. They were releasing some
Oh
interesting
yeah,
films. So Sogo Ishii was like, did we release any? I don't remember if we did. But I mean, they were the guys who let me do the Tokyoscope book because they were going to get into live action film
cool.
distribution. So whenever there was a visiting Japanese filmmaker, they would come and hang out and we'd get lunch or something like that. So Sogo Ishii was like a really down to earth, really kind of quiet, mild mannered dude. But like when those movies lit up, he told the projectionist, he's like, you got to play this as loud as you can.
Yes,
He's like,
yes.
when we had Volt Dragon, I mean, screened, that was like it was one of my most memorable film screenings. It was so loud. It was like, it was that noise core kind of Japanese
Yeah.
aesthetic, like the Boredoms or Mersbo or something like
Yep.
that. It would had that kind of punishing, pin you in the back of your seat kind of quality to it. But he himself was like so down to earth and so mild that it was hilarious that his imagination when it was unchained was just so gosh darn loud.
Oh, so loud. And like, I mean, to own a Blu-ray of Punk Samurai, I didn't think it would happen. It's just beautiful. These are ones from Third Window. Burst City is an Arrow release, but Third Window is just doing great stuff, and I love this director. And I forget what his name used. Oh, it's Gakuryu is like what he changed his first name to, I guess.
Oh, okay. Wow.
But that's like says here he's ex Sogo Ishii, so I guess that's an update for me. But
living his best life, I guess.
Yeah. For me, the Blu-ray era has been just like less discovering new things and definitely filling in holes or replacing old things.
Yeah, no, there's so many films that have come out on Blu-ray from guys like Arrow or Third Window that just they've been around for decades, but like only at the Japanese video store with no subtitles.
Yeah, yep.
And I guess in the last like 5 to 10 years, like the floodgates have really opened, especially for like a lot of those old Toei films where the distributors, like some of them didn't want these films to be seen outside of Japan because they were kind of seen as sort of like lowbrow embarrassments. They're like, no, check out our big budget prestige productions.
Right,
Don't
sure.
look at our low budget garbage. This is not meant for international audiences. And if you did want to release those films, the licensing fees were like so outrageous. I don't know if the idea was like Japan just deliberately pricing their media so high, even for like DVD and Blu-ray,
Yeah.
that distribution rights should also be a king's ransom. Or if it was just to kind of like, we don't really want to share this with you guys. It's not for you. I don't know what that was. But the floodgates finally opened. I don't know what it was. I mean, the Japanese economy hasn't been all that great. They probably need all the money they can get nowadays.
Yeah.
Especially if it's in US dollars. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously a few big movies that haven't come out yet. But things like Horrors of Malformed Men, that's like a movie that's not even available in Japan. It's still considered like banned. It's still verboten.
Oh, yeah. When I read
midnight
about it
screening.
in your book, I was instantly searching for it, and I can't.
Yeah, no, and Synapse Films, I don't know how many years ago that was, released it on DVD in America. So, the floodgates opened at some point, and we're kind of in a golden age now if you can afford to keep up with it.
Yeah, and also just these labels, again, to talk about the supplements on these Blu-rays, but it just really helps cement something in a time and a place and give it sort of an importance, so it's not just a random curiosity, if that makes sense. And so people like yourself just are so great at that. And so I love it when I buy something like this, where you have the 80s Kadokawa years, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, Kadokawa.
Yeah, his Motorbike Her Island, or the Stray Alley Cat Rock movies, and it's just like, I only knew there was one of this, or I've only seen two of this director's movies, and then, somebody is there to sort of explain to me this trajectory, or this led to this, and it's just like, I go, oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's a lot of history. Yeah, I'm glad a lot of these tales are finally getting told.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like another big kind of watershed moment was kind of the release of Kill Bill Volume 1. That kind of hipped a lot of people to things like Female Prisoner Scorpion.
Oh, yeah.
And that was kind
Lady
of a,
Snowblood, for sure.
There's all kinds of references in there to things like Gok, Body Snatcher from Hell. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not the biggest fan of that film. It's a bit like a wax museum for me. I'm like, I love Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction to death. But Kill Bill was like a big commercial for Japanese cult cinema in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched Lady Snowblood last year for the first time since watching Kill Bill, and I was like, oh, wow. This is...
Oh, well, is it a homage? Is it a ripoff?
Exactly. Oh, man. Because I felt it when I watched it, and it made me really, like, I'm just one of those people. I got really mad about it because I was like, who in the States is going to know these movies that he's talking about? And now, like, with podcasting and stuff, he's more verbal about the things that he was homaging or lifting from.
Sure.
Air quotes. And so I feel better about it. But it's like, anytime I would watch movies, like, Natural Born Killers had a bunch of stuff that was, like, from independent movies. And I was like, well, who's going to know? Like, they're just going to think this director's a genius and made this up. But, like, watch Lady Snowblood, and it's like, oh my gosh, so much
Well,
of
to be
it.
fair, when he came to Japan to do publicity for Kill Bill Volume 1, I mean, that's all he was talking about
That's
is
great.
like how much he loved Lady Snowblood, how much he loved Kajimeko. Like he was really upfront about all the references and the love
I
letters,
mean, you'd have to,
Japanese
right?
cinema.
Like, you couldn't go to Japan and be like, don't know what you're talking about.
Uh,
It's like the same shots. It's like, okay, fine.
yeah, it's harder to get away with that kind of thing now, but
Hmm.
I'm a Tarantino fan when he's good. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, any director. I love it when they're good. And especially when, like, because sometimes I'll watch stuff and I'll go, oh, this person's seen, like, I just watched Extraction 2 on Netflix here, and it has, like, a prison, fight scene. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, they've
I watch
seen,
it as well. I don't know why, but I
yeah.
just, yeah.
I'm like, oh,
There was a lot of hype on it for like 1 week. I
they,
think everyone's already kind of forgotten about it now, but for 1 week, it's like, oh man, you got to check out Distraction 2, man. It's
yeah. And
awesome.
I'm like, oh, they saw Raid 2. And then there's the train sequence, and I was like, oh, they saw Carter. But I kind of like it if they're like showing, like, hey, look, we're up to speed with stuff. I go, oh, okay, okay. But like when it's large chunks of things, and I'm like, well, like Stranger Things, I was like really struggled with here in the States because I said, if you took all the homage out of it,
Yeah.
what's left of the thing? Like, I don't know. And that made people
Yeah, I'm
really
sick of
mad. So,
nostalgia.
yeah, same.
I'm really tired of it. I mean, in my own work and I'm always looking for new stuff. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
not trying to. I mean, I have obviously with Tokyoscope and stuff like that. A lot of it's about looking back and kind of pop culture archaeology, but I don't want to pretend like it's still the 70s.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's
same.
just it's so easy to just cut and paste. And I think I don't want to go back to Kill Bill, but that was kind of that for Japanese cult cinema, for good and for bad.
Sure. No, I think that's an excellent point. And since you mentioned new, I think that we simply have to talk about streaming
Oh yeah.
because for me, in Oregon, not having, like, as I've said, like a Japanese video store or anything like that, I'm just waiting because I'm like reading up on the artists and things that I love that are working in Japan, and I see a movie listed, or same thing for Korea or Hong Kong stuff, and then I'm waiting like sometimes a year. There's no way I can set a Google alert on my phone or something that I know of that's gonna tell me when like Bad Cop or something comes out, or Bad City was the one that I was waiting for recently. And so I'm just every couple weeks, I'm just like, is this movie coming to streaming? And it's like,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
because the chance of it getting a release is even slimmer for a Blu-ray, at least for a couple years or something. So my struggle with streaming is the waiting game.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really have to rely on like podcasts and like social media. I mean, because people will recommend films, people whose opinions and perspectives I trust. I mean, otherwise there's no marketing for
Hmm.
these, films often when they come to streaming and stuff like that. They just have to be discovered. So it's a weird age. And here in Japan, streaming is insane. I mean, I feel like again, like I've won the content lottery because
Yeah.
like Toei has like the Toei streaming channel.
Okay.
Toho has the Toho channel. All these studios, all these guys from back in the day have like released most of their old libraries. Like kind of everything is available for streaming for either a small price or for free. And so
Wow.
I'm catching up on stuff that I never saw. And it's usually like TV shows because a movie would get some distribution or it would get, if you were lucky, it would find its way to a Japanese video store. But TV shows, like studios like Toei were making like thousands of TV episodes of like action shows with a lot of the same staff as the movies that just never got it out of Japan. Things like G-Man 75 or The Hangman or
I've
like
heard of
Seibu
Hangman. I've
Keikatsu.
never seen it, but
Yeah, and so those are great, and I'm always down to watch a Japanese cop show that I've never seen before, or like a karate show. There's like again, companies like Toei were just like grinding out content, whether it was movies or TV shows for like decades. And there's so much I've never seen. To me, it's like the new frontier.
that's
But
amazing.
also there's just terrestrial TV here. Well, not terrestrial, but there's just TV in Japan. So there's like a Toei channel that's just on 24/7. And there's other
Wow.
channels that just show old stuff, like the Family Gekijo. There's the Jidai Geki channel. And that's a lot of fun because I'll just, turn on the TV and see what's there and discover something totally new, like back in the day. Right.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Never know what you're going to see. And it has the commercials
Ah,
and stuff like that. And they'll run like old trailers sometimes. So I feel like I'm 5 years old again, like just sort of flipping channels and discovering new things on TV.
I love that. That's amazing. I don't have that. We have Hiya in the States here, and they'll get some movies, but a lot of it's the same stuff over and over and over. But they did get a film that I was really excited about in 2019, directed by Kensuke Sanomura, and that was Hydra.
I've
Uh,
not seen it. I don't know this one.
oh, it's a delight. The same director did Baby Assassins, and soon like Baby Assassins 2, I think, is coming out.
Okay.
He's a stunt coordinator by trade, I believe. I think this is the first thing he directed, but because he's a stunt person, it's a wonderful slow burn of a movie about a mysterious person that works in a bar. But the thing is, like, when it becomes about the fight scenes, they're like the most amazing choreographed fighting,
Oh, cool.
because it's like he's I don't think I'm revealing anything, but he's essentially like was like a John Wick kind of thing situation, sort of. But so every person that he fights is essentially like that, and it's not about like so many movies. The hero gets beaten to a pulp, and then he finally, it's the old Hulk Hogan thing from the '80s, and
Hmm.
then he wins the fight. And these fight sequences are more like these two people are so good that if one of them makes a mistake, they're dead. And so it's like you feel this heightened thing, which is what I thought the John Wick movies would be. It turns out he's just sort of good at being an assassin, but also really gets mangled a lot. So it's just very different to see this, and I love that it sort of takes its time and sits you in this small bar in Japan. So
Oh
yeah,
man. Yeah, I'm writing this down. I got to watch this
yeah,
one. It sounds
Hydra.
great.
I recommend it. It's one that like I watched, and then the next night I was like, I'm gonna watch it again. Like, and I just like, I bought the Blu-ray when it came out, even though it's streaming. I was like, I just need to have it so I can look at it and be like, I really like this movie. So
So it's
that's
Hydra. So at the end, does like Nick Fury show up and like recruit this guy to like
no, and
join Shield and fight Hydra?
I just barely know your reference, but yes.
Comic book nerds.
Yeah, it's something. But that brings us to the end of the conversation. Was there anything else you wanted to throw out here for the evolution?
Oh, well, I don't know. I'm just excited to see everyone interested in cult film, in Japanese film, Asian film, any kind of film. And I think, yeah, it's great that it can help connect people
Yes.
across generations, across cultures, across boundaries. Because I don't think I would be living in Japan if it wasn't for seeing Godzilla when I was 5 years old. So it's a weird path, but that's the magic of the movies. That's
That's
entertainment.
so true. And I hope that you get to go to that Godzilla escape room and live.
Yeah, there's all these Godzilla attractions now. There's like a Godzilla zip line. You can like take a zip line through Godzilla's mouth in
Oh,
some mountain resort town or something like that. There's,
why not?
Godzilla the ride, kind of a immersion VR thing. There's so much Godzilla stuff to do.
All
I
right.
just wake
Well,
up every day and I just look at my planner. It's like, okay.
yeah, my daughter from a very early age, I've taught her well. If you ask her where the best candy comes from in the world, she says Japan. And my wife and I were supposed to go for our honeymoon almost 20 years ago. So
Oh my
we,
gosh.
as a family, will be going to Japan.
Oh, come on down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have friends that
It's
live
awesome.
outside of
Especially, yeah.
Tokyo. So
Yeah, I can show you where all the crazy video stores are, what's left of them. I mean, they're
yes.
transitioning. That's the sad thing, is
Oh, what
the
do they?
landscape's really changing.
Hmm.
Yeah, some of those old rental stores that were booming like 10 years ago. I mean, that was kind of the myth is sort of like Japan still loves its physical media, and it's changing real fast.
Oh
So some of
no,
those old video stores are going,
I
gone.
gotta speed it
But
up
the
then.
collector's market here is still great. So if you are, I can show you around.
Okay, perfect. I would love that. And my last question before we close it out here. I had a friend who lived in Tokyo I mean, I have a friend that's lived there for decades, but a friend that lived there for 4 to 8 years, somewhere in there. And they said that they could not find good Mexican food in Tokyo. Do you have anything to say to
Oh, I
that?
feel his pain. I feel his pain, man.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm from California. I'm Mexican American, and that is it's a bone of contention. Yeah.
Oh,
Because
is
someone will say, "Oh yeah, no, I know this place. Oh, this is really good. No, this guy went to America. He's from Mexico. He does it right. Believe me, this is not like Taco Bell." And it's just always disappointing. Just shaking
I was
my head.
hoping that you would just randomly know of something that they hadn't heard
No,
of.
no. I mean, I can get like C grade. I'll give it a
No,
B or
that's
a C, a B
they
minus.
they knew
But there's
that level.
nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all there is. But the same thing is when I'm in America, Japanese food
Yeah,
sometimes. I'm really
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
This is
I mean, I
ramen.
guess
All
it's
right.
anywhere you go.
The grass is always greener.
That's the situation. But Patrick, thank you so much for your time and for coming on today. It's been an absolute blast to get to talk to you. Could you please tell people where they could find you?
Okay, well, I'm on Twitter at Patrick Macias, and I started blogging again after a long time. So that's Tokyoscope.blog. So I'm sort of pushing hard on that at the moment. So I would be really thankful if people check out the Tokyoscope blog, named after the book.
Perfect. I will be checking that out for sure. And please, I hope that you have another Movies That Made Me episode of your podcast. I really liked those anime.
Yeah, maybe we can do one for live action film because I think we
Yeah,
were just focused so much on anime. Anime, am I pronouncing that
back to
correctly?
the anime.
We should
Yes,
do a live action one as well. That's an idea.
I think it'd be
Yeah,
great. Each of you doing, because the episodes are only like 20 minutes, so you each take a turn at it, and there you go. You got two free episodes right there.
there you go. Awesome. Thank you so much for the idea.
Yeah, of course. As always, I'm Dirk Marshall, and this has been VHS.